It's me again. All right. Thank you, Minister Ian, for those words. What I really like about this is that normally us, the researchers in the room, we have to say the stats, and now we know that people are actually reading the reports that we write. So let's give a hand. So we've heard a lot about the stories, we've heard a lot about the figures and the statistics, but let's talk about lived experience. Lived experience is so important to the work that we do. So many people in this room have shared experiences, and some of us even have the privilege of being able to name those experiences without worrying about the impact on our work. This conference wouldn't be possible without the support of the LiveX community, a community that truly embraces everyone who steps in as one of their own. Being able to name lived experience and to be embraced for experiencing hardship is transformative. A colleague of mine often states in her work that youth homelessness is an issue of disconnection from community, from family, and from systems of support. But when we're able to build those pillars back in our lives, amazing things can happen. We become interdependent, and one person's success becomes all of our success. Almost 10 years ago, I went to my first conference on youth homelessness, and I just so happened to witness our next speaker's first keynote address. Excited and in a bit of disbelief, I remember feeling not only inspired by their journey, but extremely impressed that someone who had been through it was out here just doing it, just saying what they needed to say. And now they might tell you, no, it was nothing. Very humble this person is. But I insist that when we show up authentically to institutional spaces, ripple effects can happen and people see new possibilities for themselves. Our next speaker has been a trailblazer in academia and is currently an assistant professor at McGill University in the Department of Integrated Studies in Education. When I looked up the areas of expertise last night in this bio, keywords such as activist methodologies and anarchism came up, as well as youth participatory action and homelessness, of course. So we'll be seeing a lot more of this person over the next 3 days. And if you haven't guessed by now, the person that I'm welcoming to the stage is none other than Jane Malenfant. So let's give them a welcome.
If I just start talking, can you hear me? Hey! Do you guys want to go ahead? Wherever you go? Okay. Oh, there's a lot more people once you get up here. Thank you, Marty. That's my spot. How's everyone doing? Eh? How are you all doing?
Great.
Ça va?
Yes.
Bonjour tout le monde. I am Jane Malenfant, and as usual, I have tried to come up with a crew because I enjoy doing work around youth homelessness. I enjoy doing research. I enjoy doing everything when I can learn from other people, and so I'm super grateful to be able to chat with some amazing folks today. And I'm gonna probably not talk that much, hopefully. It's blinding. Good morning. Okay, so we're good? Okay, I am not going to introduce folks, but I'm going to let people introduce themselves. On va avoir un panel bilingue aujourd'hui. Si vous avez besoin de traduction, I think there's écouteur en arrière, or English folks. There's some kind of translation that should be happening. Cool. Well, let's get started. So I'm from, I live and work in Tiohtià:ke, or so-called Montreal. I'm from Kapuskasing, Ontario, Treaty 9 territory. I'm someone who has lived experience of youth homelessness, but I'm less young now. I was born after 1994, Marty. I'm an older youth, or perhaps just an adult, but I try now to really be dedicated to learning from young people who are going through the things that I try to study, which is how systems bring young people into situations of precarity. So that's me, and I'm gonna invite folks to introduce yourself, what territories do you work on, who are you, and how do you enter this topic of youth homelessness? Alors, si tu peux donner une petite introduction et partager un peu tes liens avec l'itinérance jeunesse, et on va commencer avec Alex.
Ben, je vais là ou là, ici?
On peut rester ici,
Okay.
oui. Can you see us?
OK.
Cool.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Alexandre Poulet. Je suis content d'être ici aujourd'hui avec vous. Je viens de Montréal, puis je suis dans l'itinérance depuis que j'ai 15 ans. J'ai commencé à m'impliquer en recherche sur l'itinérance. J'ai commencé à m'impliquer dans les recherches qui s'intéressent aux conditions de vie des personnes qui habitent la rue. J'avais aussi dans des cours d'université, je suis consultant en itinérance pour aider les instants dans leur prise de conscience. Si je suis ici, c'est pour vous partager ma réalité et pour changer les choses.
Merci beaucoup, Alex.
Ouais.
I'm going to hop over and ask Michael, did you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Jane. My name is Michael Reyes. I am a first-generation Canadian Nicaraguan settler. My grandparents were amongst the first wave of Nicaraguan pioneers here who fled the Nicaraguan Revolution. We came here via Panama, and we settled in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. And then we moved to Treaty 13, Toronto, Takaronto, and I've grown up here. So like Jane, I'm an adult, older youth, I guess. and yeah, I come to this conversation from a Canadian, Latino, multi-ethnic lens and perspective and experience. So I really wanted to thank Jane, thank this conference, because in my experience coming to these events and speaking about my professional experience with social service, also my lived experience growing up here and all the barriers and things that I've faced. It's not often that you see Canadian Latino youth, LGBT youth narratives, and so I wanted to just kind of give some insights, and hopefully that would inform everybody's research, everybody's policy making when it comes to understanding the nuances, the particularities of the Canadian LGBT youth Latino experience in Canada, on Turtle Island.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining, Micah. I'm going to throw it over to Jupi next.
Hi, I'm Jupi Bowen. I'm coming here from New York City as somebody who didn't grow up in New York because it got too expensive and my parents had to move, but as somebody whose family, both sides of my family immigrated there in like the 30s or something like that, and did like experience homelessness back then. I've also experienced youth homelessness in my life. And I now work in like the social service aspect of things, doing like peer health navigation, housing case management. I didn't mention what lands I'm coming from. My bad. I come from Lenape-Hoking and Canarsie land, aka Brooklyn, New York. I wrote something else down. Oh, I had a question actually about like when you say how are we coming into this work? Do you mean like our philosophy around it, or like literally like our jobs?
As usual, Jupi, I am vague in my questions. So however you want to answer that, how do you think about this work in your mind, in your daily activities, or otherwise?
Yeah, okay, cool. I'll take the philosophical route then. I see homelessness in general as a failure of our current society, but youth homelessness in particular is like one close to home because I've like been through it, but also just like so particularly heartbreaking. No shade to adults, and I think it can be really overwhelming when we're trying to like think about these like big issues, and people can kind of like freeze in that. And I feel like I'm seeing a lot of that currently, and it's quite frankly freaking me out a little bit. But I do know that this is like solvable, and I really do have like revolutionary like hope for the situation.
Yes, revolution, hope. I'm into it. Thank you, Jupi. Tamer, I'll throw it over to you.
Thanks, Jane. Hi, everyone. I'm Tamer Linklater. Oh, sorry. Okay. I'm getting better. I'm working on bringing my indigeneity to spaces. So I'm going to start over. Anin, Tanase, Buju. My name is Tamer Linklater, and I'm Cree from northern Manitoba, Treaty 5 territory. But I was born and raised in Winnipeg, and now I'm in Peterborough, Ontario, working. I came for school, and I like it here so much I haven't left. Yeah, and I work at the Research for Social Change Lab with Naomi Nichols, who's in the audience somewhere. And I was raised in child welfare, and I aged out of child welfare, and that's kind of where I'm coming from today. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy you all agreed to join me up here, and let me grill you with questions for the next however long they let us stay up here. So you'll see, I know this is an international conference. Folks on the panel are really situated on Turtle Island, but I wanted us to also think of different communities and different aspects and different systems that bring young people into homelessness. And so my next question for you all are, what are some ways that young people in your community, however you're defining that, enter homelessness? Ou que sont les parcours des jeunes dans ta communauté vers l'itinérance? And on va commencer avec Michael.
So in my experience, lately what I've been hearing whenever I do see Canadian Latin American representation is a myth that is very true in many ways. You know, typically Latin American families are pretty, tight. We have a very strong, cultural, history of having really strong families. However, right, we're not a monolith, and so in my experience, I grew up with my elders, my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, and lovely people, of course, and now they're almost in their 90s. And growing up, I found that because of cultural reasons, whether it be religion, whether it be conservatism, whether it be homophobia that's ingrained in a lot of cultures, transphobia and misogyny, patriarchy for various historical reasons, there was friction, there was contention. And I remember, being a teenager, growing up in Canada, in retrospect, experiencing that disconnect with, growing up here, coming into myself, being permitted to do that, and then also living within a family who thankfully never, kicked me out, but in many ways, you are pushed out by that kind of situation that you're found in, right? So I left home very early, and one thing that I find is that myth that, we need to kind of always be critical because not everybody's experience is the same. And so for me, that played a big role in, kind of having to go out into the world by myself. And thankfully, I grew up in this country, in this nation state where, Canadian culture values social safety nets. It's disheartening that, sometimes now it's not as, top of mind as it seems to have been in the past. But that was really a buffer for me that really kind of helped me try to find my way and thrive. And then I've been seeing and feeling and experiencing kind of the waves of Canadian culture and all of it. And so, yeah, for me, I know that the majority of LGBT Canadian Latino youth seem to share the same narrative. And that's something that I don't want to be lost in translation, because having that strong family connection, that strong community connection, all of that is really important for anybody. And so when you don't have that, or it's not provided and offered, you find yourselves in situations that are very precarious, very vulnerable, very traumatizing. But thankfully, I grew up with elders who gave me a good foundation, and so I was able to use that despite all the various limitations that I confronted.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Michael. Jupi, do you have?
Yeah, for sure. The way I see most youth entering homelessness is either through some sort of like pushing out, kind of like what Michael was saying, of like the word I used was kind of like a defection from some sort of family value that's usually based in misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, a phobia, or an ist, you know what I mean? I also see a lot of people just aging out of the foster care system. I think that's like a lot of us like see that in our work. And again, like folks are getting pushed into these precarious situations on top of that, and then you have to like, I kind of call them like opportunistic issues, if you will. Like the system keeps just like pressing on the youth more once they're even more disenfranchised, so they're more susceptible to things like sex trafficking, drug use, XYZ. And one thing I didn't mention is that I also like work in HIV and with queer people specifically. So then at that point there are hires for HIV. It gets weird. I'm trying not to curse. I also see a lot of student homelessness. I had like a good friend like back in college that used to like made friends with the janitor so that he could like sleep in the janitor's closet to be able to still go to school, because paying for dorms like wasn't a thing, and it's a lot more common than you would think. And there's simply just in New York or in the United States, there aren't enough youth programs. Most of like the housing vouchers that like I would be able to give out through my work are for adults and families. But like for example, let's say somebody has a family voucher, but then their kid turns 18, it gets like really complicated, and there's a potential that under the HUD, Housing and Urban Development grant that like we work under, there's a good chance they like won't be able to receive that funding anymore. And now the social service agency that's supposed to be helping people is furthering like the homelessness problem. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Jupi. So the state doesn't think of them as older youth anymore. They've become adults, and there's something in that transition. Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Tamer.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of ways that Indigenous youth become homeless. We've kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'm going to expand on like aging out of child welfare. Often, like we get a sum of money, and then they'll help us find like an apartment, and then that's it. They'll like help us get a really nice couch or a really nice gaming chair, but then they don't help us. We often don't get like job training, resume training, basic life skills like budgeting or any of that. It's just, oh, here's your place to sleep. Bye. You're now an official adult and you can figure it out. And I never saw the money when I aged out. It went straight to the foster parents because they stayed with them much longer than I should have. So like there's also that like not talking with youth and kind of being like, oh, we're going to make these decisions for you. We know what's best for you. Just listen to us. And often it leads to very precarious and very scary situations. And like just there are like new initiatives aimed at youth aging out of care. I don't know how that's going to go, but the hope is that's going to improve things. But again, that lack of communication between workers and the youth, and just kind of that like, I don't want to say infantilization, but like the speaking down to you. Because people just assume that we don't know what we want or what we need, and they make that decision for us, which is often wrong. And then incarceration. We are over-incarcerated and we're over-policed. And any little thing we do, if it's perceived the wrong way, which it often is, we'll get like put in jail. And then when we age out, when we like finish our sentences, we get dropped off like downtown, and there's no like, hey, you're gonna go to this place, and we're left on the streets, and then it just feeds like this cycle of incarceration. Yeah, and it's more like addressing the primary crisis of the moment and not that long-term solution. It's a problem that needs to be solved, but like we're not people that need help. It's kind of how it's felt. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I add to that before you like move on to? So like doing jail support in Chicago, because Chicago polices their youth like no city I've ever seen. Doing jail support, which like if you don't know what that is, it's like when people come out of jail, you like find them resources, you get them home, XYZ. You would not believe how many of the people I've worked with are like 13, 14 years old. And then, you know, they might go home and their parents like kick them out or something over it, and then it just like snowballs into a whole other thing.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Well, and I think the idea that these young people don't deserve help, or there's something that makes them unworthy of help, is a huge problem. Yeah. Alex, est-ce que tu veux ajouter?
OK. Ben, pour ma part, quand tu es un jeune qui a eu un passage au centre jeunesse, c'est encore plus difficile de trouver ton chemin. Le centre jeunesse, c'est des milieux malsains pour notre développement. Tu es tout le temps confronté à l'obéissance pour voir si tu peux mettre en action les plans d'intervention qui étaient mis avec eux. C'est un milieu où tu es étiqueté, souvent mis à l'épreuve, ce qui fait en sorte que tu perds ta confiance en toi-même. Les règles et les conséquences sont infantilisantes, puis ça nuit à ton épanouissement, à ton autonomie. Les systèmes axés sur la récompense, ce qui fait qu'à chaque fois que tu dérives du cadre, on te traite comme un criminel en brimant ta liberté, en t'enfermant dans ta chambre. C'est rigide, l'encadrement est intensif et punitif. Les institutions brisent notre enfance, nous poussent à faire des fugues pour retrouver notre liberté, mais tentent à t'obliger à vivre dans l'itinérance. C'est ça.
Merci, Alex. Now, and I think when we've been chatting about this, some of the things that have come out are how important community can be, but that it's something we need to look at with complexity, that community isn't just one thing. People who might identify as belonging to a community might not all have the same experiences, but also what's clear is that many systems we rely on to care for young people aren't imagining the young people that they're actually having to try to support, and that there's these broken or difficult spaces where young people aren't getting what they need. And I think something that also comes out a lot in our discussions is that young people are infantilized, or there's these paternalistic approaches, particularly for certain young people, that they don't know what they need and they don't know what they want. And we know that that's not true. People typically know, at least in some way, what they need to feel safe and well. But this question came out of our discussions, and Tamer, I think you brought it up. We talk about community a lot. We might talk about community engagement, you know, this community or that community, but we sometimes don't even define what it is, and it might not mean much if we don't actually think of what community could be or what communities are. And so my next question is, knowing that community can be kind of a protective factor, you've all referenced something about community. What is community to you? C'est quoi la communauté pour vous? Et on va commencer avec Tamer.
Okay. So the reason I thought this is a question that should be asked is because as an Indigenous youth, we're so disconnected from, you know, our homes and our families, and it's like rooted in colonization, residential schools, child welfare, jail, and we don't often define what it is. So for me, it's a reciprocal relationship with the people I have around me. They kind of like, it's super important. It's like when I'm sitting with elders, I'll learn from them and I'll gain new perspectives. And when I'm sitting with like my nieces and my nephews, it's kind of like, you know, I'm learning how to like be joyful and play and have fun, then also guiding them. So it comes in like different ways. There's like my direct community with like the people I spend the most time with, like my brothers, my elders, not my elders, elders. the people I work with, the people I do activism with, and it's always like a reciprocal thing. So like they offer me something, and then in return, because I'm so grateful and thankful, I then offer what I can for them. And honestly, if it wasn't for the community I found in Peterborough, I would not be here today. Yeah, just sorry, I need my notes. Yeah, so it's like different levels of connection and communication and not importance, because it's all important, but yeah, it's about feeling connected to, having a sense of belonging and a sense of worth and safety.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tamer. Alex, même question, c'est quoi la communauté pour toi?
OK. La communauté, c'est nos pères de la rue. C'est les résidents, les commerçants qui nous aident et qui nous traitent comme des citoyens. Ce sont des intervenants qui sont présents et qui sont capables de briser les barrières pour vraiment t'aider. Un instant, OK. C'est aussi l'agent de sécurité, le chauffeur d'autobus qui te laisse faire une pause ou une sieste parce que tu es à bout et que tu n'as pas nulle part où dormir. La communauté, c'est aussi la solidarité puissante qui se crée dans les campements. Quand tu vis avec tes pairs, ça te permet de te réveiller avec du monde qui vit la même chose que toi. Ça change notre journée au lieu de se réveiller seul et isolé dans le bois. C'est une solidarité qui t'aide au quotidien pour réduire ta solitude et ta tristesse. Quand tu vis en communauté dans la rue, ça sauve des vies. Quand j'étais dans mon abri de fortune, je partageais ma place avec d'autres qui étaient vraiment mal pris et qui auraient pu mourir. Ça peut être un brin insécurisant, mais ça, c'est la solidarité. Dans la rue, plus qu'on s'unit, plus qu'on réduit les dangers, puis qu'on reste en vie. Les campements peuvent aider dans l'absence d'un système de soutien. On devrait avoir accès à un milieu qui répond à nos besoins, car plus qu'on est stable, plus qu'on prend soin de nous et plus qu'on peut se sentir accepté et respecté dans la communauté. Mettons que tu te sens pas mal plus dans le bateau au lieu d'être dans le chute Niagara. Donc, c'est ça.
Merci beaucoup. Oui. Et je pense que la solidarité, c'est quelque chose d'important, mais difficile à trouver des fois, particulièrement avec les gens qui n'ont pas vécu la même chose que toi. Alors, j'aime que tu dis que c'est vraiment des fois des pairs qui sont les seules personnes qui connaissent qu'est-ce que tu as besoin dans ce moment. Oui. Merci beaucoup. Michael?
So, when this question was asked and I was asked to reflect on what it meant to me or means to me, it was really challenging because, I'm 41 now. When growing up, I think in my teens, my 20s, I was a much more quiet, reserved, maybe meek kind of person. I've had to grow into being more assertive and learn how to do that. And I think that it's been complicated because sometimes you're put in situations. For example, I live in the inner city of Toronto. Basically Toronto's ghetto. I don't think we ever talk about how Toronto has an inner cities downtown in the core, but we do, and I live in that community. So I feel like in certain spaces, you're always kind of trying to find community when you're marginal or disenfranchised, but it might not always even be easy, and that causes, anger, rage. It causes, mental health problems, because you're always kind of seen as, in my experience, you perceive being seen as, kind of on the fringes. You're, even with TCHC workers, for example, you are kind of just another person in housing. So it's hard to build that community, but then there's moments where, I see that within all of that challenge and barriers and complexities, people do build communities. So it's really interesting, how you end up developing communities sometimes out of the lack of it. And then the older I'm getting, I'm finding that, I've kind of pushed back and removed myself. I'm more kind of concerned about, protecting my wellness, especially with the work I do as a street outreach laborer. So, you try to find community. I was actually talking to somebody last night, and it was a really insightful comment that they made, because I said, I'm kind of nervous about this. I've never really done a conference where I'm speaking. There's going to be so many people, and I know that I'm trying to remember that it's bigger than myself. And they told me that's so great, and then they started talking about how that's community. And I was like, that's actually really interesting, And so another aspect of community too is books have always been really important for me. And Toronto's really cool in the way that we have little tiny libraries all over the place. So you can leave a book, take a book. And I found this book that I haven't put back yet, but I did give some books. But it's, I noticed that Dr. Alex Abramovich is here, and it's Where Am I Going to Go? Intersectional Approaches to Ending LGBTQ2S Youth Homelessness in Canada and the US. And so leading up to this conference, this has been kind of like my Bible, and it has so much amazing information and resources, And the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness, Homelessness Hub, was involved in this. And it's funny how life kind of just ends up taking you where you kind of need to be. And I never thought when I found this book on the street that I'd be here talking about this very subject, adding, my Canadian Latino element and theme to it, because I find that in the States, obviously, we have a lot more data, a lot more statistics, a lot more representation. In Canada, not so much. But I did see some in this book. And anyways, the point is that, there's community even when you don't realize there is, and just knowing that there's these people that have dedicated their lives to, like Marnie said, to this work is just amazing. And that gives me a sense of there's community. There's community everywhere, and even sometimes it might be difficult to see or feel that community, but it's always there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you found that in a random box.
In a random
Wonderful.
little library, yeah.
The homeless, COH, everywhere. Thank you so much, Mike. I think, that's what I think is exciting too, that we get to chat this morning, that this should be how we enter these spaces, from people with different perspectives, but also people who maybe felt like they would never be in this position to be able to talk about this. So thank you so much. Jupi, your thoughts on community?
I like that you said my name. It was like a song. Anyway, I feel like community can feel like it's like everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Like what you just said about it being like community is there even when you don't see it, like really like brought that thought to my brain. Because you're out here, like we're all out here advocating for like marginalized people and people who like need the most like assistance right now in this moment. But at the same time, like some of the people we're thinking of are feeling very alone, And this is a result of like us living in late stage capitalism and this age of like extreme levels of individualism. Like community is not valued at the level that it should be. And I feel like also the systems that we live in correlate like the nuclear family with community, but especially when we're talking about like queer youth, like that is often like not a thing. So to get to like what community means to me, it can be a group or a person. I wrote a group, but I guess you could have community in one person. Working towards like a common goal or having just like a shared core understanding of like how they want to walk through the world, how they want to interact with other people, and then communing around that and being like intentional about it. So community is becoming increasingly inaccessible, just like as we go through time as it currently stands. And I also think we need to look at community with like more nuance than we do, because I feel like it's generally correlated with like positive things, but community can also be awful. I would not have been homeless in Atlanta when I was 21, something like, whatever, it's a blur. When I was like 21, if it wasn't for like some really shoddy community. So we can't just say that like, get friends. There needs to be like more intention than that. So I think all of us should like consider how we're approaching community and how we're being community members in the like community that they're in. I just used community like 50 times. But yeah, many of the reasons certain youth are homeless is because of like the people they've been hanging around. Is my point. I think that was it. Okay.
That's very solid. Well, yeah, and I think relationships can be complex, and they maybe can also be positive and detrimental in different ways. And to be able to sit with that and navigate it honestly is very rare, and I don't think we're equipped to do that. Do you think
Michael and I have something to add?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just talking about the like disjunction in community and how it's complicated. I think it also requires a lot of work on yourself, healing your intergenerational trauma, your ancestral trauma, really like knowing your core values and what you believe in and what you're willing to stand up for. And it doesn't just happen. Like sometimes it does, and you just find your like soul people, which is great, but it doesn't always happen that way. It has to be very intentional and direct.
Yeah, you have to work.
Yeah, and to Tamer's point as well, like, I mean, there's been times I remember in just my memory that, you are intentional and you do express an interest in mentorship, which is so important. You express an interest in, having allies. One thing I love about this particular group that I found randomly, because I saw the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness conference, I applied for a bursary, and then there was a table with Jane. And one thing that I really, really respect is that Jane has always been receptive to including so many, like a plurality of voices, a plurality of experiences. And that mentorship, that guidance, that is really important. And I find that from my conversations with people that I serve now, from my own personal experience, and speaking with other Canadian Latino people who've gone through the homelessness experience, the unhoused, street-involved experience, sometimes we're dismissed and we're not seen as worthy or something of having that mentorship, that guidance, and that's not easy to not always internalize, and so people, I think, need to recognize too that when someone is young and they're vulnerable, I know that for myself, I had to really posture a lot of the time being stronger than I actually was, and I recognize now in retrospect that I was very strong. But there were moments where people didn't see the vulnerability, they just saw maybe my posture or something. And so I do want to say, being allies is really important, mentoring people is really important, not dismissing what people are maybe not be telling you as well as going on is really important, and just being open to that. And yeah, like I do feel too that, having the knowledge that there's people, again, like doing this work and are open to that in this room is really, really encouraging.
Yeah, thank you all. So maybe could we intentionally create a community towards a shared aim for the next 3 days of trying to figure out this issue? Are people down? Okay. And maybe an openness to ensure that when we're meeting each other, we aren't assuming where people are coming from. We're not assuming that we know where they're at just because of maybe what's on their name tag, or I don't know, if they have a fancy coat that you think you couldn't afford, but it looks really nice. Yeah, so because I think community takes work and it's intentional, and sometimes coming in with a sense of openness can open conversations that it wouldn't. Openness. Merci. J'ai une autre question pour vous. I think that it's important to look at what isn't working, honestly, even if some pieces of it are working. But I also wanted to ask a question around what do you think is working from your perspective, from either your lived perspective, from your work that you're doing, or the things you're witnessing in your different communities or the different spaces where you are. And particularly, we talked a lot about, do you see spaces where people are building solidarity between communities? Alors, quelles sont les choses qui marchent bien dans votre communauté, ou les places où on peut mieux travailler ensemble? So, on va commencer avec Jupi.
Oh, okay. Hi. The number one thing that pops into my head anytime somebody asks, like, in like a social context, what's working? Cash assistance. Give people money. It's like, first of all, like like vouchers are great, but I would love to just like give you your rent for a year, you know, like in a perfect world. But in this world, what is working is community building, like for my clients. So like, my philosophy towards social work is that like, as a social worker, I should not be your only community or like human interaction. But that happens a lot with my clients because I work with only like formerly homeless people. A lot of them are like come from very like disjointed families, or like they don't have any family anymore for whatever reason. And I am sometimes the only person they are communicating with for like weeks on time. I only see them like once a month. And it really affects the psyche. Like it really affects people's well-being, especially like mentally and emotionally. So anyway, what is working for me is actually connecting with mutual aid networks, which is like I'm technically not supposed to do, but I don't care, because like I really did get into the work to help people. So connecting people with like food pantries, or like not just food pantries, but like food. Oh gosh, like those free fridges. I don't know if you'll know what voguing is. Okay, cool. Yeah, but like connecting people with like voguing is. It's a gay thing. Google it. I don't really know what else to say. But it is a very solid community for people that are like, you know, into it, that want to dance, that want to be around people that are like them and just like have a good time. I've seen connecting clients to stuff like that work way more than me being like, I'm going to refer you to another social worker. Because dealing with the system is really ishy. I really want to say like the bad word, but it's whatever. In New York specifically, New York Public Library, Brooklyn Public Library, they have really solid resources for like, you can go and talk to like an on-site social worker like most of the week. And that's been really helpful, just as having like that, first of all, just libraries as third spaces are just like important, but also having that assistance there is something that is within the system that I really do see working well. But yeah, mutual aid first, always.
Mutual aid, gay stuff, free food. Sounds good.
Yeah,
you can all cuss up here. It's okay. I give you permission. I'm sorry, everyone. Thank you, Jupi. Okay. Je pense que Tamer va.
Okay. So things that are working well. Well, okay, I have a lot more to say about things that aren't working, which is ironic because I'm an idealist. But like, there's a lot of silos happening. Like, mental health stays in this lane, physical health stays in this lane, housing stays in this lane. And there's not a lot of like interconnection between all of those things. And that's particularly like for youth and care as well, as there are all these silos. There's one person who like navigates you through all of them, if they even remember to. And there's not a lot of cross communication. There's not like community building within the silos. And then like funding and cuts in services and having to beg your MP or the premier, I'm not saying his name, like begging them for funding, and then it's only like 5 years, 2 years, and then you can't do anything with this. You set it up, and then the money runs out, and you don't have the time to continue it. And again, like addressing the very specific crises in that moment, not thinking long term. But things that are working, and this is something that the lab does really well. I love my job there. I should talk about it more. But we really foster like joy and fun, and it's really weird because like this is really heavy stuff, but like the amount of laughter that we have at the lab and the connections between the communities. We just had a full day symposium with like most of, if not all, the social service and like all the sectors in Peterborough. And that's something that like is super important, and it's much easier in Peterborough because it's like super small in comparison to Toronto. And like, I feel like actually belong and I'm valued and like I have influence over things and people, which is wild because I can lose my phone while I'm holding it. But it's just like remembering that we're people and that fostering that and really listening. And again, it's much easier in a small town. But yeah.
I mean, some small towns. Can I bug you, and then maybe we'll come? Yeah. Actually, no. Go for it, Jupi, and then I will bug you.
Okay. I just wanted to say I really appreciated what you said about like fostering like joy in the situation, because I know like I had an old client that was like, everything about this is so gray, like in an appointment, because it is. Like literally the building is gray that we're working in. Like I am always wearing, I'm very colorful as you can see. I'm always wearing colors or whatever, but like the people are very gray. And he was like, it's genuinely depressing. Like, can we start meeting somewhere else? Because like it's messing with me. So yeah, like I appreciate you emphasizing like having laughter, you know, when people are like going through these, you know, objectively harrowing situations.
Yeah, what a revolutionary idea that joy should be part of our work to support one another. But Tamer, I wanted to bug you a bit more because I know you're also an artist, and I've used some of your art as it mobilizes research to talk about these issues, and I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about how you approach that, like how you do art in a research or community engagement context.
So we will be talking about that later
never
today.
mind.
It's the last session. You should come see.
Okay.
But so art. As an artist and an Indigenous person, it's like literally I do it all the time. It's something I bring with me everywhere. I always have a pen and a paper. And again, joy. At the lab, we like start with, it never was an intentional thing, I don't think. Naomi, you can correct me if I'm wrong there. But like we started a program with like an art space, and we worked together for like 3-4 weeks. It was a long time, and we just made stuff together. And like I'm a writer, so if I'm not reading or researching, I'm writing, and like just. I love doing it, and Naomi could see that passion. She's like, yeah, let's do more of it. So we made like 50 zines, and we were looking at the data, the interviews, and we're like, what can we do with this that's different? So I went through them, and I picked like key themes, things that stood out to me, and then I cut it all up, and then I put it back together. And it was really difficult and challenging, but it was so important. And that's the thing with like cultivating joy or like bringing the things that you like to do and that you love doing to your work. And not to like do the whole capitalist monetize your hobbies thing, but it's just something I enjoy doing. And then we started doing more of it at the lab. And that's kind of the lens I come to with like almost everything. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tamer. Alex, la même question. Ce que sont les choses qui marchent bien?
OK. Qu'est-ce qui marche bien pour moi, c'est quand les personnes nous soutiennent pour avoir accès aux toilettes, de l'eau potable, une place de répit où tu peux te reposer un peu, te divertir, un lieu où tu n'es pas confronté en constance à la réalité de la rue, tu sais, où tu peux t'évader un peu, comme il dit, de pouvoir trouver des besoins propres à toi pour pouvoir t'évader puis oublier un peu ta vie. Puis, qu'est-ce qui marche aussi, c'est d'avoir accès à un organisme accueillant, sans préjugés, qui est capable de briser les barrières pour réellement t'aider. C'est que... Qu'est-ce qui marche surtout, c'est d'avoir accès à une subvention au logement pour aider à se retrouver une place puis se starter quelque part. En tout cas, moi, ça m'a énormément aidé. Avoir un logement, c'est d'avoir accès à un lieu à soi, une stabilité, une certaine sécurité. Et ça me permet de mieux dormir la nuit pour mieux me concentrer et évoluer au lieu de vivre pour survivre. Dans la rue, chaque minute, c'est une minute que tu ne sais pas à quoi t'attendre. C'est imprévisible, c'est un combat autant physique que mental. La rue, c'est fort. Les impacts peuvent être graves. Il faut mieux agir dans la prévention que dans l'urgence. Tout le monde qui voudrait avoir un logement devrait y avoir droit. C'est ça. Ouais,
Oui,
merci.
merci, Alex. Merci.
De rien.
Je suis d'accord. Michael.
So, like everybody, I think there's a lot of things that aren't working, but to keep on that growth mindset, theme, I do think that we're really blessed in a lot of ways. Obviously, things aren't perfect, but we do live in a city, in a country that seems to try to have an intention of moving things forward. So I think that's a good thing. I think that a lot of what in the States we call DEI, so diversity, equity, and inclusion, they're things that are really ingrained in the Canadian culture, in the Canadian history. Like we've really infused our laws and our institutions with like the Human Rights Code and this and that, and so our charter. And so I feel like there is that push to be inclusive, to have a circle that's ever growing, and I think that's really, really good. So I like to do a lot of Canadian Latino advocacy, and so in the organization that I work at, for example, after 10 years of advocating, nearly, I finally got the support that I needed to start a Latino community of inclusion and a Latino staff network with the aim of doing more hiring, more retention, more mentorship, more professional development, tracking statistics about disproportionate disciplines within our community, upward mobility, how management needs to reflect more the communities that we serve and all of that. So I think that was a really big thing that I'm really happy I stuck with. Also too, like the AGO has also been really receptive, for example, to a partnership that I proposed to them about, supporting social service, social workers in having the space open to Latin American refugees, immigrants, new Canadians, permanent residents, and also citizens, so that we know that these institutions also serve us. And we know, as Tamer was saying, that art heals, art opens our minds, art creates community. So that's been something that's been really good that I think is working. Also the ROM, I took inspiration from the Met in New York. And so the Met has a program that's in conjunction with the Smithsonian, I think, and they have a Latino kind of centric programming where it's called El Met. And I proposed the same thing to the ROM, to do like El ROM. Just again, to open the space to people in our demographic to be aware that these spaces are for us, and that builds community for posterity, for the youth coming up. I feel like sometimes these spaces are spaces that we may not think are for us, but they are. And so, doing that kind of work. And then also for me too, in this whole process of growing and being reflective and learning and from my experience, my lived experiences, all the varied experiences, the positive and the negative, I've come across a lot of amazing resources on the internet. Like YouTube is an incredible tool for finding good things. So for example, Dr. Bruce Perry came out with a book in 2018 with Oprah Winfrey. And it's called What Happened to You. So it's like the latest science, the latest neuroscience of trauma and all of that. That's been really important for me in my own personal growth journey, finding joy in like, scientific ways of like, putting this theory into practice, not only personally, but also in the institutions that you work with. I took a lot from that, and they also have implemented it. You can find the conversation on YouTube with Oprah and Dr. Bruce Perry, and they interview, for example, Chief Justice Salazar, and she talked about how in the States they're starting to infuse a lot of policies in like the carceral system, the justice system, the education system, in certain areas, not everywhere, of course, but with all of this data, all of this science that's coming out about how to do things empathy, joy being central to it, art. So that's really helped. And yeah, so I think there are a lot of things that are working. I'm really encouraged that when we started this conversation, everyone was talking about how homelessness is something that is we can do it. We can try to solve things, and it's encouraging that there's conversations more about housing first being important. You cannot do anything unless you have a place to live. You can't heal yourself, you can't contribute, you can't do anything. So yeah, I think, doing that, and then also having a lot of our social safety nets and institutions, again, opening the floor to people who have the experience, who can lead and contribute and participate to identifying problems and finding solutions.
And lead that way.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Oui, oui, absolument. Oui, peut-être Alex et Jupi.
Ben, juste dire que quand tu te sors de la rue, c'est quelque chose aussi, ben, c'est aussi apprendre à se réhabiliter, apprendre à dormir, à manger 3 repas par jour, apprendre à réavoir des conversations avec le monde, à vouloir réinteragir avec le monde. Ça, c'est pour ma part à moi. C'est quelque chose qui était quand même très difficile en sortant de la rue. Là.
Oui. Et qu'il y a beaucoup de travail de peut-être trouver la stabilité après ça. Oui. Yeah, Jupi, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was, I got a ping in my head when you were talking about the kind of programs that are being infused into the carceral system and various other federal systems. Yes, the science is the reason it's getting the funding, and I say that to say researchers have a duty to the causes that matter, because social workers and activists have been pushing for programs like that decades. But it doesn't matter if there's not numbers, because a part of whiteness is only trusting the written word. And that is what the United States government adheres to. And that's why I say researchers do have a duty to put the numbers behind it so that the funding can actually get to where it needs to be.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I think this idea of Alex, moving from just surviving, thinking of joy, and all of these things that sustain us, but then also thinking of who gets to decide what that looks like, and our responsibility as people who might be involved in research or policy or other spaces where decisions theoretically get made in some way, having accountability to disrupting what joy must look like in these spaces, or what stability must look like, or security.
Can I just say one more thing?
100%.
So another thing that I think is working too, for me personally, is that there's a little bit more representation for Canadian Latino, narratives in general. I know that former Heritage Minister Pablo Rodriguez, I think he was the first Canadian Latino who was really calling on the first Canadian Latino Heritage Minister, I think, and also just I've never seen a minister who's in the Canadian, leadership who's Latino, so that was amazing. And I think he called us all to action, just like that song Get Loud. He basically implored us to, do this, sit here and talk about things and make people aware that, there's a demographic of people that maybe are invisible in our conversations. And so I really respected that Minister Rodriguez did that for us.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, cierto.
Sorry, it wasn't an angry look, I just can't see. Yeah, and thank you all so much. And I think you've highlighted sometimes also you have to, if you can say no to the just going along with the way things normally go, and seeing people who come from our communities or who share our experiences in spaces where we don't usually see them can be really powerful for thinking through change. Thank you all so much. I am out of questions. I also wanted to acknowledge the fact, I know for those of us particularly who have been through these things, it can be a lot of labor to talk about it. And it's already also something that can be a lot of labor to talk about the systems that harm young people in our different communities. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be up here with me and share. I asked you all questions, but do you have anything, d'autres choses à ajouter avant qu'on finisse la discussion? No? Other folks?
I appreciate this conference for bookending with lived experience, because a lot of conferences won't do that. So, yeah, thanks.
Yeah. And you can see us on Wednesday at the breakfast thing then, I think. Well, okay then. Thank you all so much. Merci à tout le
Thank you,
monde. And have a great conference.